Alrighty, now that we have our API calls kind of set up for post requests and get request, let's go ahead and move on to actually setting up. Well, let me rephrase that. We have our player controller as well set up. Let's go ahead and move on to moving all of our code from our game mode into our player controller for the reason, I don't know what I just hit, for the reason stated in the previous video. So in our player controller, I'm going to go ahead and create a new function. Let's just call it void handle, handle server entry. Inside of here, we want to do pretty much what we have commented right here. So I was kind of doing some thinking, and if we do not have an entry, I'm kind of contemplating this, so we only do one actual HTTP request. Words are hard. Instead of doing two, we just do one. So when we do our initial get request, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a control boolean. So I'm going to have a boolean in here. So uProperty bool, let's name it is valid, I guess is valid. And we're going to set that equal to, we'll do false for now. That's going to be its default value. So when we go through, and that's going to be pretty much what we just get. So we join, we want to do our get request. So we're going to copy everything in here. Like so. And we're also going to have to copy the includes. So I'm just going to do the JSON object converter for the .cpp. Fix some of those. And in the header, we have to include http.h. And always make sure whenever you're including something in the header of a UE4 class, do it before the dot generated. So now we just have to copy. I'm going to go ahead and bring over the two functions here as well as the HTTP pointer. Make them protected. Create the implementation of our function call there. And what was the other thing? I'm going to go ahead and set it up in the constructor as well. So in our constructor up here, we go ahead and get our module, well, the HTTP module. So now the only thing we have to really worry about is this can actually all be handled inside of our player controller. So I'm going to copy our ustruct and move it right over into our persistence player controller.h. So that way we have access to everything we need. Then we just have to change a persistence tutorial game mode to persistence player controller. So that way everything's just kind of moved over and set up on our player controller itself. So we're not doing a post request. We are doing a get request. So we can actually get rid of this chunk here as it's no longer needed and change post to get and uncomment out where we process the request. I'm going to go ahead and yank all the junk out of our post login and remove that function call. And where we set up our HTTP, that's everything. Oh, and the includes. Okay, just like so. So now we have everything moved over. So what we're going to want to do is in our post login function in the game mode, we're going to go ahead and get the new player controller. So we already have it as new player, but what we want to do is we want to cast it. So if a persistence player controller PC equals cast a persistence player controller from new player, and it went ahead and included it for me. We want to include persistence player controller.h. We're going to do PC handle server entry. So that's going to pretty much trigger this function to, well, it's going to call this function. We're going to run through when we join. Again, this is all on the server. So what we can actually do is if does not has authority, we just return, so that way we know we're only going to run this on the server because we don't want the client to run this at all. So if we have authority, we go through, we do a get request, And here we want to get an ID. So what I mean by that is we're going to have to set up another get mapping, but it's not going to be just a normal get request. It's going to be a different one. So I really need to zoom in on this. I'll do that actually here because we're not going to be doing anything in this video regarding it. But pretty much instead of find all, we have other functions like find by ID. And we could pass in an ID, or we can create what I said a while ago, where we create a custom, that player ID that I was referring to. So we create a custom procedure that we can create the function for and call inside of our player data repository. And that's the route we're going to end up going. So let's go ahead and do a quick comment of what we need to do. So we have everything set. And we want to, actually I already commented all this stuff through. So we want to do a get request through the API by passing in the player ID right there. And this is what we are going to not do, because regardless, we are going to return this structure from the request. However, we're going to have this Boolean here be what dictates whether or not it is actually found. So because we added this Boolean as our control, we need to add it inside of our data table and inside of our API. So we're going to do that to our data table first. So we go to our MySQL workbench, find our data table, alter the table, and let's add a new one. Let's call this one, what was it called? Is valid. So is valid. And it's going to be a Boolean. Unless I'm being blind, is there a Boolean or is it just integers? Here's Boolean. Okay, you want to, whoops. Tiny int. Dang nabbit, I can click it. Oops. Alrighty, that's kind of neat. I guess we're using tiny int, so I guess that's kind of the same deal, but I'm not entirely sure. Then I want to move it up to the top. So we have is valid, then our X, Y, and Z. Now, in our API, we have our ID. Then we want to add, before our X coordinate, a var, what was it called? Is valid of the type Boolean, and we're going to set that by default. We're going to set it equal to false. Alrighty, so we should have everything now. Close down U. And we want to go ahead and apply our changes to our data table. So, as you can see, it kind of screwed with our data table, so we want to select all of our elements. We'll just delete them. Then we're going to refresh by selecting all of our rows again. So now we have our ID as valid, X coordinate, Y coordinate, and Z coordinate. So the way we pass all this in is, what was it? Is valid. We're going to do false. I think we can do it that way. So now let's do it as a post. Send it. And it would probably help if we were actually running the API in the background. Make sure it's running. Okay, send it. And we have an issue. So I think that's partially due to the data type. So with tinyInt, I'm not entirely sure what it refers to. Let me Google that real quick. Okay, I resolved the issue by changing is valid to all lowercase, which I still don't fully understand the naming schemes of these things as to why some work and some don't, because yeah, I just have no clue. Anyways, change that up. So the type is Boolean. Left everything the same, and we're good to go. So I can pass this now in, like so, as a post request. Refresh, and we get everything we need. So we have is valid as false. And same thing goes, we can now change this to true. Pass it on in, and we have it as 1. So we're good to go. So we have all that set up. We have everything moved over to our player controller, like so. So now we should be able to do what we need to. So we're going to do the basics like before. So if success, else. We want to make sure we know that we failed. So ublog. That we failed. And otherwise, we just print out, again, the response get content as string. That way we know what we got. And we're just going to perform a quick get request, and we should hopefully get that list there. So let's just confirm. And here we go. Is valid true, is valid false, yada, yada, yada. We have all the information we need. So now we just want to make sure we set this up. So I'm assuming this might fail as the post request. So we're going to actually really quickly, I'm going to Control Z, copy our player data and, well, pretty much everything we do with the JSON object. Then right up here, do the same thing again, except we want to make sure we do player data dot is valid. We'll set that equal to true for now. And now change get to post, setting the content. Just go ahead and build it and give it a try and make sure it actually shows up in here. We hit play, see what happens. All right, nothing got printed. Refresh. And there we have it. Except the issue that we have is valid is showing 0 when we passed in true. So we're probably going to want to rename this to is valid in all lowercase. Give it another try, which means we have to restart the editor since we're making the change in the header. Now let's do a quick look. Seems like we're okay. Refresh. And now it shows 1. So we are set up and good to go. No longer need to have select you. No longer need these rows. And we are set up. So now we have it where we have our is valid. We can have everything set up. We're making our request through the player controller. So in the next video, we are going to actually create some form of player ID, as well as I'm going to figure out how to zoom this in because it's not doing it by normal. And set up the get by ID function that we're going to have to create, in which case we actually are going to probably end up creating a custom procedure here that we're going to call and go that route. So that's going to be all for this video. If you like what I'm doing and you want to help support me, feel free to, well, there would be a link to my Patreon down in the description below where you can find my Patreon only series where we create team deathmatch from the ground up using C++ with Unreal Engine. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to join my Discord down below, and I'll see you in the next video.